got kind of.
Okay.
Okay. Introduce yourself and what you do for our audience.
Sure. So my name is Jannie, and I call myself a creative business consultant, but pretty much I help online coaches and service providers who are experiencing inconsistent income months around the 1 to 5K mark, learn how to scale their business through streamlined systems, potent messaging, and captivating content, so that they can confidently stand out as an expert. So that's my jam.
Yeah, and so since these interviews are on networking, I want to know how your networking strategies have evolved over time.
Oh my gosh. One of the first net I don't even know if I'd consider it networking, but I did an Instagram live, a collaboration with somebody. It was a hot mess. And I remember being like so embarrassed and just feeling like such a newbie, and just feeling like the person also kind of knew that, and total fish out of water moment. And yeah, after that, it was just a matter of allowing myself to do it, make mistakes, be uncomfortable. And now it's a little bit more natural, just simply because I've had more experience with interacting with other entrepreneurs, being online and connecting there. So it's a lot more natural. But when I first started, it was awful.
So, like, how did you find that first person?
Okay, like real talk, I felt like instead of being like empathetic, I felt like she was a little bit, I don't know. This is maybe my opinion because again, I was the one embarrassed, but I didn't feel like she was very compassionate or empathetic. And so it was almost like it was just a weird vibe. It was a weird vibe where she could tell I was uncomfortable and awkward, and it didn't really help that she was not really trying to make me feel more comfortable or, you know, lessen that awkwardness.
So, like, had she done a lot of these collaborations before? And
I don't know. I think so. I think she had, because one of her, I honestly couldn't remember exactly what the backstory is, but she had been wanting to grow her, it was on Instagram, and she'd been wanting to grow it. And yeah, so she had been doing a lot of collaborations featuring different people, kind of to share audiences. But again, again, this is my interpretation of where I was at the time. So I could have also just been misreading her. So I don't want to necessarily say anything negative, but I also just felt like I was so awkward. And to some extent, I felt like she knew that. And I kind of felt embarrassed when I left. So it wasn't a
so,
good feeling.
did you reach out to her or did she reach out to you? Just
Oh, I can't even remember, honestly. This was years ago. And if I recall, it was part of a challenge to increase visibility that I was doing in a program. And she wasn't part of the program, but I think she had posted in a group something about wanting to have collaborations or wanting to feature people. And that's how I got hooked up with her. So I think it was, yeah, it wasn't somebody I had personally known, which even more reason why I could have easily been misreading her.
would you say getting comfortable being uncomfortable is part of the entrepreneur skill set?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And just being okay with making mistakes, being okay with not only just discomfort and being uncomfortable, but really doing things that you're like, "Oh, I don't like this." Pushing yourself to kind of challenge through those moments where you're very, very resistant. That's some of the hardest. And the thing is, that's the hardest part, because our brains do these funny things where you will find any workaround, any rationale to not do something or to why it won't work. Instead, you could have just done the darn thing and seen if it worked or not. So
Yeah, that's definitely a piece of it is like finding those areas of things you know you need to do, but then listening to yourself and actually taking the action. Um, because a lot of times people unconsciously know what they need to do, but then they're just in the space of not going to do that.
yeah, yeah, totally. Or because of whatever limiting beliefs, they tell themselves, oh, that's not important right now, or oh, that's not what I need right now, or they don't prioritize things correctly. all sorts of sneaky ways where we will kind of stand in our own way and our success.
So,
Sure.
what do you think is the most important thing for business owners to do to start networking?
Oh, rip off the Band-Aid and just do something. Just, honestly, what I did, I joined a group program. Wasn't really wanting to do one, but that was a big way that I actually started networking. And then I was going to all the calls and I was participating and I was active in the group. So I did that. And yeah, just other, like I said, putting yourself out there, other online events I would start going to, and just being on camera, even on mute, even if I was uncomfortable, even if I didn't have makeup on or my hair done or anything like that, just pushing yourself to do it.
How is the way that you network different from other people that you know?
It's online. Um, yeah, I don't know. Honestly, that's a good question. I think when I'm trying to think of other people in like more traditional jobs, and when I've had, I guess, a little bit of a more traditional pathway, networking was usually through events, like a conference, convention, some sort of industry event. I actually worked for an event company, and so yeah, we planned conferences for this exact reason, right? Like it was ostensibly like, oh, we're going to have thought leaders talk about this topic and discuss what's currently happening, but it really wasn't. It was networking. It was essentially you paid to be part of the room, and have a seat at the table. So I think in that sense, I always saw it as an important part. That just the difference is it's online. So, it can be, in some ways, I think it can be a little bit trickier because anyone can kind of show up online and present themselves in a certain way. And I feel like because there's a lower barrier to entry online, I've had some networking experiences that were kind of like less than ideal, or put a bad taste in my mouth. So I think in that sense, if you pay for a conference, the people there are going to be professionals in their field. Whereas online, people can say they're one thing, and then when you hop on the call or you do a coffee chat or whatever, before you know it, they're hawking you some product that you weren't signing up for.
Would you say you're more introverted or extroverted?
I'm an introverted extrovert. No, I'm introverted for sure. Yeah, in the sense that I'd like smaller groups or one-to-ones. I'm not I'm not the life at the party where I walk into the room and say hi to everybody and I find my corner, I hang out, people come to me, we chat. So
How that works.
yeah.
So you would say you prefer one-to-one versus networking in groups then, or?
Yeah, or small groups. Yeah, I prefer to do, honestly, I really don't like small talk. So when you get in these like big groups and it's all just the same stuff, it's mind numbing to me. So usually one-to-one or small groups, you can kind of cut through that and get to the deeper stuff quicker. So I think that's why I prefer them. Although, it's funny, if you're looking for a question, I'll tell you really fast. So I'm kind of introverted and couldn't be quite shy and quiet. And I have a dog that is absolutely everyone's best friend and so cute. And so I can't even take her on a walk without like so many people coming up and wanting to chat, wanting to pet her, and wanting, and I'm like, that's
Such a great icebreaker. Have a pet with you, like a dog.
yeah, but there's sometimes I'm like, I just want to be in my zone. I want to listen to my thing, and oh hey, oh, hey. And so yeah, to that extent, she's making me push myself to be more extroverted in some ways.
Yeah, which can be a good thing.
Yeah, well, she's
Did you,
extroverted.
did you invest in your networking skill set?
Um, I would say yes-ish. Like I said, group programs and the online space, group programs have been where I networked. So obviously those are investments. I have invested in like conferences, professional conferences outside of the online space. So I paid for that. And yeah, I've done some paid networking online events, paid events online here and there. So yes, I have, but maybe not specifically thinking I was investing in networking, save for the conference I attended.
Yeah, so like you invested in places to network, but not necessarily like specific like coaching on networking is what you're saying then.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay. Um, Did you make unaligned connections early on that later on you realized like weren't a fit for what you were doing and who you were?
Yeah, although I guess even if they weren't a fit for like working with me, it doesn't mean that we didn't get on as, humans or so I think for me, yeah, I think it was a matter of early on finding people who I resonated with. Um, but then even more so, even if they weren't like a good fit for what I do, that didn't mean that I just like, didn't bother with them. It's just, it was kind of one of those things where I think like attracts like and you'll resonate with people. And just because it's not like the best, that doesn't mean that you would stop talking to them. So, but I've definitely had situations where I thought I'd work well with somebody. And then after having a few conversations, I was like, ooh, I don't know about that. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely different degrees of relationships. There's people who are kind of like acquaintances, and then there's people who are doing collaborations, and then there's clients or people you buy from. So not everybody is going to fit into all of those categories. And then there's people that you're like, wait, why is this person even on my profile? That's what I mean by unaligned, is kind of the people who like just troll your profile and stuff like that.
oh, I had a troll. But here's the thing. I mean, this might go back to way back in the day. I welcome different opinions. I welcome seeing a different viewpoint. I welcome someone who wants to be a bit of a troll in a way. Um, yeah, I don't mind it. I think that that's really valuable to not be in a bubble. I think it's really, really valuable to not be in a bubble. And I think that that's how you have more understanding, empathy, compassion, and just also how when, you know, I don't know if I want to swear on this, but when shit goes down, you learn not to take things so personally because I guess in some way, if you've been exposed to things that aren't like that might usually offend you, you're not as easily offended because you kind of like built up that
Resilience.
for it. Yeah, resilience, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. But I have stopped friending like appointment setters and fake profiles and things like that.
Yeah, and to some extent, yes, agreed. There are, it is interesting though, especially with some of the appointment setters and people who, depending on if it's fake or if it's actually a person. Because to that note, when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I actually did lead gen for another entrepreneur who was obviously way more advanced and successful than I was. And I didn't do like cold DMing copy paste, like that wasn't necessarily the strategy, but there was DMing people who were to some level warm, I guess you could call it. And and I had a lot of motivation. Like that was the job I had for this person in that role, but I had my whole other thing that I was starting up. So, would it be something where just because that person, maybe I can connect with somebody in that way and then they didn't go down that route? Well, actually years later, some of them are still on my friends list, and even to this day, some of us still chat here and there because they remembered our conversations from back then and appreciate them. So yeah, I guess in a weird way, it's, everyone is not just that one thing, right? And now if they kind of like cold DM you and harass you and okay, fine, that's different. But sometimes what someone is at one point doesn't mean that later on in their journey, they'll be at a place where it makes more sense for you to maybe be connected with them.
Yeah, people do change over time.
Yeah.
Um, How is the term coach perceived in the different groups that you network in? Because I know that's kind of been a thing, is talking about this term and kind of like a hot potato term. And I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to say the C word because of all the negative connotations, and not so much negative connotations, but all the expectations that go with the term. They think like, oh, you must be like some kind of like super expert who knows everything, like a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Which, you know, isn't always the case, especially if you're primarily like, you know, asking questions and that type of thing. I mean, obviously you have to have some knowledge in order to ask the questions, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're like this, oh my gosh, I like know more than anybody else about it.
Yeah. So I purposely have avoided calling myself a coach since I launched my business. Because, okay, so here's how I view it. And I've actually spoken about this before. Coach gets thrown around, and like true coaching, regardless of the niche, true coaching is you asking questions and trying to elicit the person you're coaching to create the answers for themselves, or find the answers for themselves, or discover the answers for themselves. The reason I'm, not to say I don't do that, but I was resistant for a long time, is because to that point, if you ask a question to somebody and because you don't know what you're doing or you don't know the answer, and that person knows what to do, and they tell you, they're now consulting you because they're an expert and they don't know more than you, and they're telling you what they would do. That's actually a consultant.
But if
So
they're the one if you're the one, if they're paying you to ask them questions, then
for
would they
example,
really be consulting you? I mean,
well, no, you're paying them. You're paying them for answers, right?
but
So
what if they're paying you? I know it sounds weird, right?
okay, so here's the thing. If I'm paying somebody, okay, so this is, I love that you asked this because I'll give you a really concrete example. I remember asking a business coach something one time, and she just started asking questions. And I was like, well, but I don't know what to do. Like, what would you do? I was actually paying her, but she was coaching me, but I wanted a consultant.
Yeah, yeah. See,
And
that's
that's a
the thing.
huge difference.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I mean, if it would have been more clear up front, yeah, I'm going to be asking you questions and I'm not a subject matter expert on this stuff, and you're the one who knows the answers, then you would have said, oh, what I really need is a consultant to help me with this and not a coach, or not just a pure coach.
Exactly. And I think that this industry, like all the online space, completely conflates the two. And to some extent, you do both of them. Like I know I do both of them to some level, but really I call myself a consultant because that is my jam. That's what I love to do. I don't want to have people feel like they're being left high and dry, especially if I know that I can see something that they could improve upon and I know it could be improved, instead of having them try to discover it on their own. Like I don't know, for me, I hate that. I'm like, if you do, why do you just tell me? So yeah, I think that it's just because of how I am that I also would not want people to try something, and then discover if I know a shortcut to help them get there. Like, why wouldn't I help them with the shortcut?
Yeah, I can definitely see offering the shortcuts like when it makes sense. But since, you know, I coach networking, so, you know, if I'm not an expert, my coaching should help you be able to find an expert, because finding experts is actually something I'm very good at.
You're an expert in expert hunting.
Does that even make sense?
No, but and you know, I also would say, and maybe I'd turn the tables on you if that's okay. What would you consider an expert? Because I think that also gets really, misconstrued in the online
I would
space.
say it depends on where you're at. Like I could say I'm an expert in networking, but if somebody's been like, oh yeah, no, I've been like doing this for 30 years and I know like all these referrals and everything, I was like, I don't know any. But like, you know, to somebody who like forgets to follow up after networking events, I'm definitely an expert, because I can just say, oh, you know what? You need to follow up after these events to get the most out of them.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of the level of expertise.
Well, and I would also, to your point, I think it's also a matter of the type of, like for networking, it's a type of networking. Traditional networking at conferences and in-person events is quite different than online in a lot of ways. So I think, you're right, maybe somebody has 30 years of experience doing XYZ, but if they did in-person corporate and they're trying to translate that to the online space, it might not actually be completely transferable. Whereas you might be more of an expert in the online space because that's where you've honed your skills.
Yeah, definitely. So So it's expertise that are similar, but they're kind of a little bit different. So
totally.
definitely you can learn from each other. So even if you think you like know it all, there's probably something that you're not aware of.
Yeah, it should be like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything. Paraphrasing him, I think.
So what did you do before what you're doing now?
Oh boy. I have had an eclectic career. Um, I was actually working for startups for a few years before I launched, but when I was launching my own business. So I kind of already had that small entrepreneurial kind of energy. My stepdad had his own business, and so I worked for him part-time when I was in university. So I had already kind of experienced that, so it wasn't completely foreign. But before that, I was working for startups, I was teaching, I worked in politics. I've kind of had all sorts of experience. So yeah, it all kind of has come to a head in what I'm doing now in some ways. But yeah, it was not really like a normal trajectory pathway.
Yeah, but of course that gives you a different perspective that can really help people with a lot of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I did a lot of like in like contract work, and I did have my own business, like service providing in person pet sitting. So yeah.
So like when you became an entrepreneur, did that change the way that you networked?
That was the only way I would connect with people, right? I mean, it's especially at home, you were at home behind a screen all day. It was the only human interaction I had sometimes. And then even then it wasn't in person. So yeah, definitely. I remember the first year or so, it was really challenging. And I would do a lot more coffee chats or, free calls or let's connect and all of that because I craved that connection.
Yeah, that's interesting because for me, I had to overcome the not craving it in
Yeah.
order to do it because I realized I needed to do it to get to the result, even though initially like I didn't want to do it. So I kind of had this huge curve to overcome. Like, oh, people are like naturally doing this because they want to do this, and so kind of realized, well, yeah, I need to do it even though I don't feel like doing it. So um it was definitely more of a curve in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was where it kind of skewed two ways for me, where some of it was really valuable and some of it, you could always tell when someone had an ulterior motive or an agenda when they were chatting with you. Like they would say, let's have a coffee chat. And then, I don't know, I just remember like, a Zoom call and someone all of a sudden like, oh, have you ever tried this tea? Or it was like some kind of product. And I was like, wow, you know. So yeah, I think it's also about how authentic you are showing up.
Yeah, I mean, but it's natural that people would want to like try to sell what they have, but it can kind of be annoying when it's like the sole motivation for connecting with you.
Well, or just the idea of that's not the whole point of why we got in the call, right? It's for me, a call like that where it's like, let's connect, let's expand our network, 15, 20 minutes of just, chatting, hey, da 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 da, let's get to know each other, tell me what you do, I'll tell you what I do. And maybe in the future, we can, if I hear about somebody that needs something, I can send them your way, you do the same. That kind of stuff was all very natural and felt good. But yeah, there were some times where I thought it was going to be more like that. And then before you know it, you're getting pitched to, and it was like, wait a minute, this wasn't what I signed up for. So yeah, intention is everything.
So I know you have a Facebook group. Why did you choose to name it what you did?
Oh boy, because I spent forever trying to name my group and I just needed to get it launched.
So
Actually, I had another group name first and it wasn't really resonating, so I changed it. And then it just stayed the
yeah,
same.
so when I put this up, you can put your group link in the comments, whatever it is now, which I'm in so many groups, so could you remind me of what it is?
Yeah, no worries, of course. So it's called Captivate and Convert. Um, yeah. And so, well, I mean, that's what I call it. There's a whole other part to it, but it's Captivate and Convert, and I'll put the link in there. And essentially the group, I share tips, tricks. Again, as I mentioned, so like true story, as I mentioned, where I'm like the person who like sits in the corner at like the party or goes to the party and like talks to like one or two people and then like kind of will lurk from there and mosey around from there. Like it's totally obvious in my group because your group is supposed to be like a party and you're like the hostess. And I've like never,
Kind of
I've
like
ne-
huge and loud and
and I've never even hosted a party for myself, like real life. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's yeah. Anyways, like I said, I've found that the group is one of those things where I'm like, I can tell I don't throw parties for myself.
yeah, it's a skill set though, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also for me, it was more about, but you know, this is a space where I want to provide value and give. And so even if it is a matter where I'm, you know, kind of in the corner, my own little corner of the universe, metaverse, speaking to my, you know, I'd rather go deep with a few people than talk a lot of fluff to the masses. So to some extent, that kind of fits my personality anyway. So I think it was reflected in that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's real talk though.
Do you have a specific niche that you focus on?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, this Facebook group before, it was something about keeping it simple or keeping it super simple because I have this, I love to simplify things and create like systems and processes that are super efficient, which is super important, but obviously super boring sounding. It's not sexy. And so one of my things is how I wrap them up. And so I create processes that have a result that people want. And so right now, and this is actually something I've just announced, I actually created a process for creating storytelling content and creating content that actually does not sound like everyone else's chat GPT content, but it leverages two AI tools. One of them's ChatGPT, but it does it in a way where it still sounds like you and it's still your stories and it's still your voice. And I did that because frankly, it was feeling hard. And again, when it felt hard, I wasn't wanting to do it. So I was like, how can I make this easy? And I made it super easy. And then I was like, well, if I feel it's easy, other people are going to feel it's easy. And it's been a total godsend in the past month when I've had kind of a lot of ups and downs in my life. And I've been able to still be consistent and do everything I need to do. It's essentially feeling like that part of my business is a machine. And I don't need to be always so in a certain like, oh, I am in the mood for it, or oh, I'm inspired to do that. It's like, no, this is a required part of running my business, right? And so as that is, this process helps you do that, but it does it from a place that's still authentic and not, oh my gosh, not all the,
Not copy paste marketing, which I hate.
oh, and you know, it's funny because now I can tell a chat GPT post from a mile away. And it's not just about like one word here, one word there. It's like you can tell the people who are like literally copied and pasted the entire thing. And yeah, I definitely don't I don't necessarily support or encourage that.
So what are your thoughts on tapping into your intuition when networking? Because I know that's the thing that you're big on.
Yeah. Um, this is interesting because I do feel like I can get a vibe on people, but sometimes I don't trust myself or I don't, you know, I have a tendency to second guess. Um, I have tarot cards. Sometimes I do a reading on somebody just to kind of check the energy. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? For me, it's not even about the other person then. It's my intuition will tell me something and I'll say, okay, noted, but I still will kind of show up in a way that's authentic in me and give everyone kind of that benefit of the doubt or give the opportunity to see what happens. But I definitely would feel that if I'm networking or socializing or connecting with people, if I have kind of some spidey senses, it does help me make sure I kind of like protect my energy a bit.
Does that
So,
help you like figure out like who's going to be like a good collaboration partner versus not, and that kind of thing?
yeah, exactly. Or, just it's kind of one of those things where it's me knowing who I can open up to or share certain things with or feel like I can trust more than others because yeah, that's been a lesson I learned the hard way sometimes. And so, you don't want to have the wall up, but you also need to make sure that you're not just trusting everybody because you never know. I've seen it. You'll never know who will do what sometimes. And unfortunately, it can be a part of business. And I would just always say to somebody, like, if you have a spidey sense, it's, like you can listen to it. I wouldn't make like a bunch of huge decisions based on it, but I would definitely allow it to unveil itself.
And last question on my list, how do you know what investments make the most sense for your business?
Ooh, so that's a good one because this has also been something I learned the hard way or so in the past one thing I've worked with one coach for what year is it? 2024 June. 2.5 years. So she's been a consistent presence in my life, even when I've worked with other coaches and other courses, learned other things, experimented here and there. I think having that kind of high level, high touch support consistently, she knows me. I mean, oh my gosh, she knows me so well. It's really helpful, but it's also one of those things where they can call you out on your patterns, and that's really, really important. So she's someone that I invest in time and time again, for that reason. Other things, it's more about whether it's if it sounds like a skill set I want to learn, or it sounds like something that I want that would be beneficial. In the past, especially when I was newer, I didn't know what my business needed. And so that's kind of the scary place to be because that's when you can be very, if someone is not in the up and up, you can be persuaded to invest in things that really aren't in your best interest. And I was really lucky that there were actually some people I did calls with, or I had sales conversations with who told me I wasn't quite ready for what they were looking for, or they didn't think I was, they didn't think it was, and it was not that they didn't like me, they just said they didn't think it really made the most sense, or they didn't actually even sell to me, which meant now I look at it and like, oh, they didn't pitch. They knew I wasn't the best fit for where I needed to be at the time. And so I actually think that that's beautiful. And I love that. But yeah, I definitely have also had people that, they knew where I was and what stage in my business I was at. And they were like, oh, this is going to help you do this. And like, they knew what helped me. And so to that extent, I think especially being clear on who you want to work with and where they are in their business is important if you're B2B. So for me, if I have somebody who's like brand new, they're just not like, I can help them, but based on what I'm offering, it doesn't really make sense for them. And I would rather them find somebody that can help them where they're at and then come to me afterwards when they're ready to be at that level with me. So yeah, I think it's just a matter
Have
of,
like referrals for that
pardon?
that you offer
Yeah.
people?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I've I've given out so many referrals. I've connected people for that exact reason, because even if I'm not the best person for that, or like what they're looking for, or where they're at, or what they need, I just believe it'll come back. And so I've absolutely referred people out, connected people, done all that. But yeah, I think the thing is, if you don't know what you need until you're at until you made a few mistakes. Once you've made enough mistakes, then you start to realize what's important and what you need. But until that point, you kind of just invest in everything. And then, yeah, hoping something sticks.
Yeah, I've definitely invested in things where I realized like later on, oh, there were like other pieces that I needed to have in place, but I didn't even realize those pieces existed when I
Yeah.
invested in the thing. Or like there's times when I'm like, if I would have paid more attention, I could have got more out of this program. But of course,
Totally.
you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And I mean, that's why I always feel it's really important to ask really good questions. So, you know, a lot of people will be concerned about the price, or will be concerned about, oh, is it a group, or is it one-to-one, or how many calls, you know, the kind of the nuts and bolts, but they're not really asking the questions like, so, you know, what is the, like, it's more of like, what result can I expect? Or what they would say is, maybe even if they say, I'm looking for this result, have you worked with somebody like me, or have you yourself gotten a similar result? Or how do you feel, like, how do you see yourself being able to help me get that result? Because I think that's a really important question, because, you know, it's,
Yeah, the how are they gonna get you resolved? Because yeah, like everybody wants compliance, but is done for you appointment centers the answer? In most cases, probably not.
right, right. And that's a numbers game, and that's playing by a different kind of strategy, where it's, you know, it's not about really connecting with people. It's just, let's throw this out and see, after a few numbers, someone will bite. I tend to be more aligned with wanting to attract and find the right people.
Yeah,
So,
especially when you have a more specialized niche that you're working in, like,
right. And, you know, it's also one of those things where I think that you'll get the best results, and the people will get the best results when when they're coming to you at the point in their business where they need to be. And so even what I was just saying about, you know, if you're on the other end, you're the person making the investment, asking questions, honestly, also the person who's selling, you should also make sure you ask very potent questions. If you hear things that are kind of red flaggy, ask. I definitely have had conversations with people where I've asked questions to clarify, and then decided whether their answers meant that I thought they were a good fit or not. So, you know, again, people think about asking questions in a way to like make the sale, but really part of asking the questions is also to make sure that you are fully aware of who you are selling to, and who, like, if you are really the best fit for them.
yeah, definitely. It's kind of ironic. When I first started out, I actually hated the fact that I wasn't a good fit, because I kind of thought all coaches were the same and they all coached in that way of just asking questions and not necessarily being experts.
Mhm.
And I've since learned so much, and I realized even people who are just asking questions and coaching in that manner are asking different types of questions depending on what kind of a coach they are.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's really a matter of kind of what you mentioned. There are coaches that's like, a true coach doesn't always, I think about like a true coach is kind of almost like they can border on being a therapist at times, where the person doesn't have to actually gone through the experience that you're going through, because the way that they're coaching and the questions they're asking and how they're helping you, again, discover the answers and process information and figure things out for yourself, to some extent they might not necessarily have to have the same results that you're trying to strive for, because they can elicit that out of you. But yeah, if you're hiring an expert for their expertise, then you do at least want to know that whatever they say, they have experience in. And also, you know, my big thing is, if you don't know something, don't be afraid to say you don't know, because that's the other thing I see is people pretend they're experts in everything, but then it's okay if somebody asks you a question, you're like, you know what? I have a lot of experience in this, but honestly, I don't really know about that. Cool.
Yeah, I don't have any more questions for you. If you had a question for me before we end this, you
Yeah,
can go ahead and ask.
I'd love to. So what would you say would be, so one of the mindset things, or one of the biggest challenges I found with myself when I first started networking, and then even afterwards, when I'm helping newer entrepreneurs with trying to expand their networks, or, you know, connect with people, what is your advice for people to kind of go into networking with the intention of not having the what's in it for me mentality?
Well, I think the first thing is like when you go to like networking events, you don't like expect that, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to this networking event and then I'm gonna like everybody is gonna become a client, or everybody is gonna be a good fit for my program, or everybody's gonna want to buy my service. You should really be looking for more like partnerships and like relationships where say like they could refer you to people, or you could get in front of their audience, rather than, oh, they'll become a client. I mean, some people might become clients, so obviously we should talk about what you do, and if they're interested, then you can offer them, but I think too many people go to networking events thinking that it's gonna just, like, I'm gonna meet this person and then it's just gonna result in a sale because they'll be a perfect fit, when a lot of times, it's really getting to know people better and to have those referral partnerships, have those collaborations. So it's not like just pitching your thing.
So a follow-up real quick to that, because I love that, is how could you, what kind of like criteria, or what's your selection process for finding a good networking event and not just a networking event where everyone's there trying to pitch their stuff and buy my thing, buy my thing?
Well, first of all, I think it's like, it kind of depends on your industry, like what kind of networking events make sense. I mean, sometimes just going to general entrepreneurial events is good because you just kind of get that overview of things. But you want to go to events where people who would refer your ideal clients to you, probably a good idea. And then you kind of want to go to the ones that are related to your industry. So I think the strategy would be a little bit different for everybody, just depending on what you're trying to do. So it would kind of be customized to your specific business, like what would make the most sense. And in some cases, it may not necessarily be going to more events, but connecting with people who have specific types of businesses or audiences or whatever.
Okay, so you don't have like a certain list of, like, you don't personally have like a list of criteria of, oh, if I see something like a networking event, I kind of do a little mental checklist of, does it look like this? Does it feature that?
Well,
You
I
just,
mean, I don't tend to go to like general, I mean, sometimes I'll go to like general networking events, but like, it's not like, oh, you need to go to 100 events. Like, are the people that are going to help you specifically for your specific business there? And like, does it make sense for you, like where you're at? So it's kind of like, I mean, I do have networking events that I know about that you can go to, and if they make sense for somebody, I would definitely like recommend that they go to them, but they don't necessarily make sense for everybody.
sure. Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, you're kind of inspiring me. I was like, I should do more networking. And now I'm like, oh, I should probably do more networking. I've been a little bit of a hermit from it for a while. So thank you for helping me kind of break out of my shell and realize that, it's time to kind of get back out there.
That's what I help people with.
I know you're good at it. Thank you. Thanks, Lori.
Anything else? Or
No, I think I know I was trying to think of questions, and when you're put on the spot, you're like,
well, that's fine. I think we've gone long enough. We have a nice chat here. And so if anybody in the audience has any questions, and I will leave a link below this video. And have a great rest of your day or evening or whatever.
thanks, Lori. I appreciate you.